is all Schillebeeckx here with another video. Click on the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, share this video, all that good stuff. All right, let's get right to it. The Pope and the Vatican, they want to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the opening of Vatican II, actually. The opening of Vatican II, 63. So obviously, Vatican II is a hot topic today, and it is the 21st Ecumenical Council of the Church. And it is true what Pope Francis says. I mean, there's a lot of division in the church. This happened a lot after Vatican II between the left and the right. You know, being a true Catholic should transcend that. But nevertheless, Vatican II was very ambiguous on really on theology itself. And one of the main proponents was a Dominican theologian called Schillebeeckx, Edward Schillebeeckx, who talked about the real achievement of Vatican II. Now, obviously, to understand Vatican II, we have to read the letter of the text, the actual text, right? That's how you understand well the Vatican II and its constitutions, right? Which is a beautiful text, beautiful, very inspiring, but ambiguities, right? No errors, because the church is indefectible; it cannot err. It cannot teach error in the ecumenical council, even though some distinguish it being a pastoral council, which doesn't mean it's immune to error. There's at least ambiguities. So the ambiguities there deal with theology, and Schillebeeckx talks about them. He alludes to them, and he talks about the fundamental view that really animates the entire Vatican II, and it's kind of speculative, or what he calls a speculative view of theology and a historical view of theology. And he makes a dichotomy here. He makes a separation between the two, which there can be. There can be. But he talks about as if there has to be between the historical, the concrete, and the speculative, the abstract. But there ought not to be. Right? As Francisco Suarez said, let the principle, right, let philosophy be dictated by reality. So, of course, the concrete philosophy has to always refer back to the concrete. It is true that if you're purely speculative, you can fall into an idealism, a rationalism, where you know the truth is here, right? Truth is mainly here, cut off from reality. But you can also fall into the other extreme, which is more common today, of materialism, right? Materialism, which believes that really also empiricism is philosophy of knowledge, that really only the concrete things exist, nothing abstract exists. There are no universals, right? And this is a much more common view. And this is what theology falls into. Theology, instead of a science, yes, abstract, based on principles, knowledge of cause, right? Theology coming from above, but it's explicated using a philosophy. Instead of being that as it classically was, theology has become a craft, something man-made, something from the ground up, not the top down. So this is the problem. He makes this dichotomy, and he stresses a lot this historical or historicism. In other words, it's kind of like a very we can say a very type of complex or a veiled, in a sense, a relativism. So you know, in Vatican II, for example, it says the Church of Christ subsistit in the Catholic Church. Originally, it said that the Church of Christ was the Catholic Church, but in Lumen Gentium, and you can look this up, it says, I'm going to look it up. Share my screen real quick, and here's Lumen Gentium. This is going to be number 8. Here, the second paragraph. This is the one Church of Christ, which in the Creed is professed as one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. The Creed said it is the Catholic Church, which our Savior, after his resurrection, commissioned Peter to shepherd, and him and the other apostles to extend and direct with authority, which he erected for all ages as the pillar and mainstay of the truth. This church, constituted and organized in the world as a society, subsists in the Catholic Church, which is governed by the successor of Peter and by the bishops in communion with him. Okay, so there was a controversial of subsists in the Catholic Church, right? And the Vatican responds, the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith responds to this, and this is 2007, right, under the reign of Benedict XVI. And it says here in the third question, why was the expression subsistit in adopted instead of the simple the word is? The use of this expression, here's the answer. The use of this expression, which indicates the full identity of the Church of Christ with the Catholic Church, does not change the doctrine of the Church. Rather, it comes from and brings out more clearly the fact that there are numerous elements of sanctification of truth which are found outside of structure, but which, as gifts properly belonging to the Church of Christ, impel toward Catholic unity. It follows that these separated churches and communities, though we believe they suffer from defects, are deprived neither of significance nor importance in the mystery of salvation. In fact, the Spirit of Christ has not refrained from using them as instruments of salvation, whose value derives from that fullness of grace and of truth which has been entrusted to the Catholic Church. Okay, so really this is not new. Of course, there are elements of truth outside the visible structure of the church. And those, there can be, as Vatican II points out, imperfect pertinence or unity or membership to the Catholic Church. But what's the philosophy? So that's almost, I mean, again, the Congregation Doctrine of Faith is affirming the traditional teaching, but in a sense, it's a non-answer because there's a philosophy deep down within it, and Schillebeeckx addresses it. Again, this is a theologian from a very important theologian from the Second Vatican Council, and he says this is interesting. He says, to be consistent, the protagonists of purely speculative truth, so these are the ones he's criticizing as being purely speculative, which they consider detached from history. Again, he's making that separation, speculative history, as if it were, can only speak of the return of all Christian churches to the one true church of Roman Catholicism. So those who are promoting speculative truth only, they only speak of all the Christian churches have to become Roman Catholic, right? This is just the pure speculatives. Those who are speculists are saying this. Whereas those who claim that truth is historical, is the position of the degree of ecumenism, is what the theologian is saying. Apply this idea of a return, in quotes, of a return just as much to the actual historical Catholic Church itself, not as if the true universal Church of Christ did not exist at all and will only come about as the result of a confessional new Church of Christ, towering above all existing churches, Christian churches. So it's not saying that there's going to be a new confessional new church, no. But that through another, more evangelical form of the Catholic Church, the other Christian churches will regard themselves and act as this Catholic Church. Now here's the key right here. There will be then a real growing together until at length, they can recognize themselves in each other. So this is why subsistit in, because even the Catholic Church is, in a sense, this is implicitly, at least implicitly denying that the church has the fullness of the church of the truth. The church also is on its goal with the other Christian churches until they all merge or they all kind of recognize each other as the true Church of Christ. So that's really interesting. And he thinks that this tension, it connects the speculative and the historical view. But no, the speculative view is correct here. The Church of Christ is the Catholic Church, right? Subsists in, again, not technically, it's not an error, right? It's an ambiguity. because they want to stress ecumenism. Remember Vatican II wants to be very much optimistic, doesn't want to condemn, like as the prophets did. John the 23rd has said in the beginning. So they focus on the positive. So that's why it subsists in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church also is going right. They're also kind of I'll just quote him again, through another more evangelical form of the Catholic Church, the other Christian churches will regard themselves and act as this Catholic Church. It's interesting. Again, this is historicism. It's historicism run amok, I say, because really the speculative view has to predominate. Right? Truth is not changing. Theology is deductive, and that's why I said theology is really affected, because theology is not from the ground up. Theology, as classically understood, is from the top down, is speculative, is deductive, comes from first principles, unchanging principles. Right? It does change, it does evolve, but only in a sense as we understand it better. Right? It doesn't change from the ground up, in the sense that new realities change speculative, um, the speculative truth of theology. But again, it's rooted in concrete acts and revelation. So this is a false dichotomy again, false dichotomy, and it's a disaster. I mean, this comes from Descartes, right? The splitting, because he split, because he believed that the senses don't give us true knowledge. Ultimately, knowledge comes from here, and then we have rationalism, right? Rationalism as separated from realism, separated from the concrete things which we know through the senses. So yes, first sense experience, mitigated realism, and then from there the speculative order comes, right? So um, yeah, really, really interesting, and again, the basis of not so sound philosophy. All the errors in theology are due to philosophy. They're philosophy and errors, as Aeterni Patri says in the encyclical letter of Pope Leo the 13th. We'll leave it at that. I think we'll do some more on this, because Schillebeeckx says this viewpoint is one that animates the entire doctrine and schema, and the schemas of Vatican II. And it's really interesting how the original schemas of Vatican II were tossed, and a new schema came in the third session, and they were quickly dealt with and quickly approved. All right, well, we'll end with that. God bless you all, and thanks for your time, and take care. Bye now.